With about 6 weeks to go until the NHL trade deadline, it's time to formulate who would be the most fun landing spots for some of the big names out there on the trade market.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my good friend and one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. And we want to thank everyone that is making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. A lot to get to today, so Hunter and I both came up with a few players we were interested in seeing get a change of scenery, whether it be they've plateaued, if they're on an expiring contract, or, in the case of a couple of these guys, if they're on teams that almost assuredly are going to miss the playoffs and need to start kickstarting their asset accumulation for a potential rebuild or even retool in the case of some of these teams. So we're going to go back and forth. We're going to alternate. The first segment, we're going to talk about really marquee stars and a lot of big names on this list today. So I'm going to throw it to you to start, Hunter, because you have the biggest name out of both of us on this list, and that's Artemi Panarin.
Yeah, I mean, this is a player that's highly expected to be traded, Nick. The Rangers have already told him that they're not re-signing him, and you could tell by some of the quotes that he was a little bit upset considering, how long he's been there for. He signed there during free agency, but it looks like, especially with where the Rangers are in the standings, it makes sense to really start going in a different direction. The season is not going the way you wanted it to. You have to move your pending UFAs, and Artemi Panarin is one of them this season, Nick. 19 goals and 56 points in 50 games. He's still very productive. I mean, he's only 2 years removed from his best season of his career, 49 goals and 120 points during the 23-24 season. Last year, he had right around 90 points. So this is still a player that can be a high impact player on a cup contending team. And, one team that really does come to mind for him, and this is a team that's going to come to mind a bit later as well, so stay tuned. Minnesota. I see that as a fit there, especially with Kirill Kaprizov. Minnesota is all in for this year. You just acquired Quinn Hughes, obviously. Them, the Stars, and the Avalanche are just taking turns beating the ever-living crap out of each other. Nick, we already know that it's going to be Wild versus Stars in the first round. That's been basically guaranteed for 2 months now. I don't think any of those teams are catching the Avalanche, who are having obviously such a tremendous season. But you're going to see both the Wild and the Stars, I think, make big moves over the next 6 weeks to try and bolster their teams for that eventual series. I think Artemi Panarin there makes sense. A sleeper team here, if this team wants to really make a big change because they're not playing well, Nick, Washington. I know Washington is out of the playoff race right now. They're not in a playoff spot. They're still technically in it, but they've lost 4 in a row. They're not playing well. They just lost to Vancouver, who had lost 11 in a row before they won that game on Wednesday. But I could see Washington being involved here too. So those are just a couple of teams to watch out for. There's going to be more, of course, but those are just a couple.
So when it comes to Panarin, the interesting thing has always been the idea that he's not a great playoff performer. You hear that a lot from Ranger fans who are happy to move on from him, that they felt that he didn't do enough when they made it. And the counterpoint to that, and what I've often said is, whenever you look at these teams that win championships, they have 2 or 3 guys of that caliber, and they play together. Panarin has always been the guy on his line. You go back to 2022, he was playing with Ryan Strome and Andrew Kopp. You look at 2 years ago, he spent the majority of it with Vincent Trocheck and Alexis Lafreniere. Now, Trocheck and Lafreniere are no slouches. They're solid NHL players. Trocheck we're going to talk about later on the show, hint, hint. But the thing for me when it comes to Panarin that makes him interesting, he still creates zone entries at a pretty high rate, which is one of the real keys in the playoffs. Can you manufacture offense by yourself? I think if you're Minnesota, I think if you're Dallas, hell, I think even if you're Colorado, I know Elliot Friedman keeps dropping that tidbit. The Avalanche offered him a 4-year, $13 million deal when he was a free agent all those years ago. It makes sense for a lot of these teams. I really do think ultimately it's going to come down to where he wants to go. This is a player with a full no movement clause who can pick his landing spot. And we have seen from time to time players make it hard on their GM. Patrick Kane told the Blackhawks, I only want to go to the Rangers, and they were only able to get a second-round pick out of him. Last year, Marchand told the Bruins, I only want to go to the Panthers, and they were only able to get a second-round pick out of him. Because in the open market, I would venture to say this is the best pending UFA trade rental in a really long time. This
Probably
is
since Jake Guentzel, I would say. Jake a couple years ago.
He's better. I think it's a higher tier than that because Gensel's still young, and Gensel's still I think he's a tier below. You know, Panarin's flirted with the Hart Trophy a couple times. It is really rare for a player this good. Maybe Mark Stone comes to mind as the last one, and he signed the extension shortly after getting there. But I think this is a really unique player, and I think the fit is really going to be important to get the most out of him because we've seen him also a pretty bad playoff series. You know, the one series against the Devils where he spent a lot of time with Patrick Kane and Vincent Trocheck didn't go nearly as well as the other playoff runs had gone. So I'm going to pivot now to talking about someone else in this tier. I think if you are a team that is on the upswing, you know, if you're Montreal, if you're San Jose, if you're one of those teams, or even if you're the Blackhawks, if you think you can get to the playoffs this year, but you still have 3, 4, 5 years ahead of you with a young core, I think you would be crazy not to be making calls about Robert Thomas. I think this is a fringe elite player. I think this is someone who's probably in the top 15 to 10 centers in the entire NHL. He's in the 80th percentile of goals above replacement. Out of 850 players, that puts him in the top 40 or 50 in the entire league. I think you look at, he's been 3 times, he's gone over a point per game in his counting stats. Yep. He's elite setup guy, one of the best distributors of the puck in the entire league in the offensive zone, creates the second highest rate of high danger passes in the entire league of any player. And he carries the puck in a ton himself too. So this is a really great facilitator and somebody I think who you shouldn't be looking at just as a complimentary piece, but as a genuine play driver that I think if you give him elite wingers can really unlock a lot of doors for you. And the best landing spot, I want to see him in Montreal. Montreal has one of the most robust prospect pools in the entire league. He fits nicely in the age cohort of Suzuki and co. Suzuki's just turned 27. Robert Thomas is going to turn 27 before the end of this year. He fits with their window of contention. He's under contract until he's 32. So you're getting the end of his prime and you're not going to be committed to him into his mid to late 30s, which I know is a real drawback for Panarin, who reportedly wants to get an extension ironed out as part of potentially agreeing to get traded somewhere. So I think if you're them, if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, who've had second line center issues all year this year, because I like Stankoven, but he's not where you need to be a Stanley Cup caliber team yet. He might get there someday, but he's not. But if you have Aho and Robert Thomas, that's a pretty good one too. And then the other one I have here, I have Detroit. I think the Red Wings are a team that fancies themselves on the upswing. They have a ton of volume when it comes to prospects, and they want to make the playoffs, and they want to build around that next group. As fun as the Patrick Kane and DeBrincat stuff has been the last couple of years, you want to start building that group around Lucas Raymond. You want to start building that group around Mo Seider, looking towards the future. And Robert Thomas, he would be the best player on that team. He would be the best forward on that team if he dropped in there right now.
I think so. I think of those 3, I think I might like Carolina the best in terms of fit. They also, Nick, have the prospect pool to really get this done. Like, you look at their prospect pool up and down. They have the picks as well. They have the roster player that St. Louis would want, the roster player or 2. I easily think Carolina could get that done. Now, I could say the same thing for Detroit, but in terms of just a fit for Carolina and in terms of a high impact forward, I think they could really use that. You and I have been saying for a long time, Carolina really needs a forward like that. Like, they have a lot of good players. They just don't have, I think, a high impact forward like that when he's on top of his game. I mean, this is a player in Robert Thomas who has been close to 90 points multiple times. His best season came in 24 when he had 26 goals in 86 points in 82 games. Nick, he was one of the biggest reasons why the Blues turned it around last season. I mean, you remember how bad that Blues team was.
He was one of the best players in the NHL last year. From after the Four Nations through through them getting eliminated in the first round, he was one of the best players in the entire league.
Yes, he was fantastic. He literally ended last season, you know, with 81 points in 70 games. He was awesome. One of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, why they made the playoffs. You look at his contract and you're right. He's making 8.1 until 2031. He's still only 26 years old. He does have a full no trade clause, so he'll have to approve where he wants to go. But still, you can get a player like this for several seasons and several really good seasons as well, Nick. Like, this isn't someone who is on the opposite side of 30. He is still in the prime of his career. I think you can get plenty more really, really good seasons out of him. So I like that one a lot. And I like all three of those destinations. Again, for me, I think Carolina is the best fit, but Montreal and Detroit would also be a lot of fun too.
That will do it for our first segment on today's edition of Locked On NHL. When we come back, we'll dive into Braden Schneider and a couple other interesting names that are floating out there in the trade market ether. There is nothing like being in the arena during hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere, it's unmatched. Watching at home is great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. Even now, as bad as the Rangers are, those 3 steps up the concourse to the actual gallery, getting hit by that wave of thumpingly loud EDM, vibrant lights, the smell of beer and hot dogs, that's my happy place. But getting to games has become a pain in the butt as of late, and that's why our friends at Game Time are giving the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. You can get access to incredible features. My personal favorite, the panoramic seat view, where Game Time shows you the view of the game from your seat before you buy, so there are no surprises on game day. The zone deals, where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats to save. And in some markets, you can find tickets for less than $25, and it is all backed by the Game Time ticket guarantee to give you peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Thank you so much to everybody that is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. Everyone making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. If you're an everydayer, you got to check out the club. The details are down in the show notes. You can get access to episodes of Locked On NHL entirely ad-free and access to the Locked On Everydayer Discord server where other Locked On hosts and everydayers are cutting it up about whatever the day's events are. So once again, I will throw it over to you, Hunter. Who's next on your list?
Yeah, so next up for me, another Blue, because you already had Robert Thomas. I'm going Braden Schenn. I hope a lot of Blues fans aren't going to throw, eggs at our faces for this. It's just for Braden Schenn. Has a couple more years after this year at $6.5 million. He does have the modified no trade clause, a 15-team no trade list. He's 34 years old, but this is a player that the Blues I know can get a lot for, especially on name alone, Nick. But the team that really comes to mind for me, it's Toronto, man. I mean, that is a really cool storyline. Yes, I know. Right now, the Leafs are not in a playoff spot. I do think they have been playing a bit better lately, though, Nick. I will give them that. I know they lost to Detroit last night. Really fun game to watch on TNT, by the way. But this is still a team that's right in the thick of a playoff race. I don't think they're just going to punt on this season, especially with a prime Matthews, a prime Nylander, a prime Morgan Riley, John Tavares is still there and all that good stuff. I still think they're going to go for it, just considering the core that they still have overall. So I think with Toronto, you can plug him in there, middle 6, top 9 role, and he can be another veteran that can really push this team to potentially make the playoffs. I mean, this year, I know his stats are a bit down. 9 goals and 19 points in 50 games. However, I mean, this has been a, prime 20-plus goal scorer basically throughout his entire career. He would give the Leafs, I think, more scoring. I don't think it's going to be cheap. I still think the Leafs have what it takes to get this done, Nick, but I don't think it's going to be cheap. However, I just think that team makes the most sense for him. So don't be surprised if they really do call on him, and if other teams also call on him, because he's a player that I think a lot of teams would really like to have for a playoff run.
Oh, this is a player who's been out there. We've heard this for a couple of years now. Yeah. The Leafs tried, I want to say last year or the year before, ultimately before pivoting to what they ended up doing at the trade deadline. He's an interesting piece, I think, and we talk about this a lot. If you're trying to go out and add the biggest fish at the pond, your roster's probably not good enough to win. And I think for the Leafs, they don't even fancy themselves a Stanley Cup caliber team. I think they just want to get in and they want to see what happens. Right. I think with the East in the state it's in right now, you have a good 2 weeks, you make a second round, and then you're playing another team that just so happened to have a good 2 weeks. You look at the state of that Atlantic division, how up and down it's been, who's been in playoff spots and when, other than Tampa, who's been consistently amongst that group basically since the middle of November. For the most part, I'm in. I would like to see it. And the thing is, and the last thing I'll say before I turn to the player I wanted to talk about, we got to actually see Doug Armstrong pull trigger on trading guys. Because it's one thing to say what he said a few weeks ago about what's the difference if we make the playoffs and lose to Colorado in the first round versus not making the playoffs at all. We got to actually see him sell off some of these guys, whether that's Robert Thomas, whether that's Braden Schenn, or anybody else for that matter. We got to actually see him do it. And then for me, I have Braden Schneider here.
I will say also, just real quick for Doug Armstrong, this will be, I think, his final trade deadline too, because Alexander Steen is taking over as GM during the summer. So I am really curious to see how he does this for his final deadline before Steen takes over as GM.
I agree with you. It's an opportunity to set the guy up for the next wave. And if you're serious about what he had said, if it doesn't really matter if we make the playoffs because we know we can't beat Colorado. If you want to take that at face value, okay, but let's see it. Make the trades. Go get 2 first-round picks. Go get a bunch of prospects and kickstart whatever the next version of the Blues is going to be, because they have a long way to go in establishing what that next group is. That's a very old team. The player I wanted to talk about in this segment is Braden Schneider, someone who, like Alexis Lafreniere, like Dylan Cousins, like a number of guys we have seen, has plateaued. For Schneider, it is a marriage of lack of development and opportunity. You look at where the Rangers are at. They are in dead last in the Metro. They are a team that has publicly announced, hey, we're retooling. This is a player in the last year of a restricted free agent deal who does not make a lot of money, whose skill set has plateaued. He hasn't really made any real improvements to his game in a number of years. And most of all, he's boxed out. They've got Adam Fox for 5 more years. They've got Will Borgen somehow for 4 more years. They traded for Scott Morrow, last summer in the Keandre Miller trade. They have 3 right-handed defensemen, all with more team control than Braden Schneider. Schneider has not come along offensively, profiles as a 5 or 6 defense-first guy. And most of all, he's still young enough that another team could convince themselves that, hey, we just need to give him more opportunity. Because in fairness, he hasn't really had a ton minutes-wise. He doesn't really get to play. He's had a revolving door of left-handed defensemen next to him over the years, whether it's Patrick Nemeth. They traded for Justin Braun at that trade deadline. Then there was Ben Harper. There was Zach Jones. They have tried Nico Mikkola. They have tried a lot of different guys in that spot, and none of them have really worked out. The team I like for him is Dallas. We have seen Jim Nill trade for right-handed defensemen over and over and over again, whether it's Cody Ceci, whether it's Matt Dumba, whether it's Ilya Lyubushkin. Schneider at least is a little bit younger. Schneider could, at least in theory, get to play with Miro Heiskanen or Thomas Harley at some point and maybe get a little bit more out of him. But most of all for the Rangers, it's an opportunity to still sell relatively high on someone. You look at trading Kakko for Will Borgen in a second-round pick, trading Buchnevich for Sammy Blais in a second-round pick, trading Elias Anderson for a second-round pick, trading Vitaly Kravtsov for a 7th-round pick. The Rangers historically have not sold high on their guys, and they have left value on the table. When it comes to Schneider, after this year, you have 2 years to make a decision on, is he a UFA we're going to keep at 27, or are we done with this? And if you can preemptively say now, hey, we have 3 right-handed defensemen who are either younger, in the case of Morrow, or we have team control over for long-term in Borgen and Fox, this is an opportunity to get, even if it's a second and a third, it's a second and a mid-tier prospect, get assets. You need assets. Whether you're going to use them yourself or you're going to trade them, you want to be as liquid as possible when it comes to a retooling period, because you never know what's going to come across your desk. Maybe you're going to have an opportunity to make a Mikko Rantanen type trade 2 or 3 years from now. But you need those assets to make those trades happen.
Right. I agree. And I think with Schneider, he's the classic, needs a change of scenery type player. We were saying the same thing about, Igor Chinakhov in Columbus, Nick, and look what he's doing in Pittsburgh, 4 goals in 11 games. Not saying that's going to continue for the rest of the season or even into next season, but it was clear now that I'm watching him more, he very much needed to get out of Columbus, get to a new opportunity, and he's playing some outstanding hockey for the Penguins. I think for Schneider, it's not to that level because I think Chinakhov is obviously more talented than Schneider, but I do think he needs to get out of New York, get to a new opportunity, get to a new organization, and be coached by different people because he's still young enough. He's only 24 years old. I still think he can have a productive NHL career if he gets the minutes, maybe gets coached a bit better, has a better partner, as you alluded to, all that good stuff. So I think that's a good one. Be curious to see how many other teams also show interest in him, but he seems to me like the classic change of scenery type player who just needs to get out of his original team here.
The other team I had other than Dallas was San Jose, because San Jose's defense is all 33 and 34-year-olds. Like, I get it. Orlov, Klingberg, and Mario Ferraro, they're doing a passable enough job. Schneider's young enough that if he's anything, they have time to figure it out.
Yeah.
And they just need bodies who are younger as that defense turns over. I was very surprised they made that Kiefer Sherwood trade last week. But if you're going to be serious about we're trying to compete right now, go get somebody under the age of 30 to be on your blue line. We are going to take our second and final break on today's edition of Locked On NHL. When we come back, we'll dive into Blake Coleman, Vincent Trocheck, and the value of veteran experience. Thank you so much to everybody that is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, to everyone making this edition of Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. All right, Hunter, give me the Vinny Meatballs preamble.
We're going to talk about Vince Trocheck's Nana making Italian meatballs every time they come to Pittsburgh for a Penguins-Rangers game. And in fact, Nick, they're coming next weekend for the Penguins-Rangers game. So I'm sure everyone's going to have a full Italian meal at his Nana's house. But yeah, with Trocheck, this is a player that I do think the Rangers can get a lot of value for. And it's on name alone. Like, you look at his numbers this year, 11 goals, 32 points in 37 games. So he's close to a point per game. Yes, he is a bit older, 32 years old. He has some terms still left on his contract. However, Nick, this is still a player that, like, the team that I'll throw out there, I've already thrown them out there once, Minnesota. He's already on Team USA. Bill Guerin obviously likes him quite a bit. I think he will pay quite a penny to get Vince Trocheck from the New York Rangers, because you and I have both said it. We think there are other players that should be there over Vince Trocheck for Team USA, but Billy Guerin values what he brings. He likes the player that can win draws, kill penalties, play a role type of player on Team USA. You and I both roll our eyes at that, of course, but Bill Guerin values all of that. And I do think if the Wild really want another forward here, again, that is simply another option from the Rangers. And I just think that right now, I just don't know if he fits their timeline with this retool or whatever the heck they're calling it here with the Rangers. He does have a modified no trade clause, a 12-team no trade clause after this year, has 3 more years left at $5.625 million. Again, 32 years old. So you're taking a bit of a risk, but the Wild are also all in for as long as they have Quinn Hughes. You already made that trade. I discussed that in the first segment with Artemi Panarin. You know, this is someone that can come in, play a middle 6 to top 9 role, even a top 6 role if the Wild wanted him to. And again, I just think he fits a Bill Guerin type team like a glove. That's the team that always jumps out to me for someone like this, Nick. So that's what I got to say about Vince Trocheck and his Italian meatballs and all that good stuff.
I think on a Stanley Cup caliber team, he's a 3C. I think if you're genuinely where you think if you're Tampa, if you're Florida, what we've seen those teams have at the third line center spot, he can do that. I think if you're asking him to be a second line center at this point, I think you're going to be a little underwhelmed. He's not nearly as dynamic as you would like from that spot. His defense isn't where it's needed to be. Playing with Panarin has given him some pretty bad defensive habits, frankly. And he's been emphasized, you're out there with Panarin, worry about offense, don't worry about defense. And it's led to some pretty ugly hockey up points over the last few years. I think if you're Colorado and you want to roll him behind Brock Nelson, I think if you're Minnesota and you don't really have a number one center beyond Joel Eriksson, who I think is a good player, but he's not a traditional first-line center we would associate with the Stanley Cup caliber team. You know, I don't have to tell you, you know, Sid Gino down the middle, having Taze down the middle. You need to have at least one of those super supremely elite number one centers, and Eriksson isn't at that threshold. Now, you can have good wingers, good defense, and Minnesota's got some great winger depth, don't get me wrong, and they've got a nice defense, but you're going to need another guy. And Minnesota makes a lot of sense. I could see Carolina doing it as well. They need another number. They need a second line center badly. I would say that's Carolina's biggest need right now.
Oh, yeah, good
and
one.
Then I wouldn't put it past either of the Florida teams if they could make the money work. But that's the big issue when it comes to Tampa Bay and the Panthers. Neither of them have a lot of cap space to play around with. They've both been in LTIR a lot this year, so they haven't been accruing space. And that brings us to one of my favorite players in the NHL, somebody who has been underrated his entire career, who can play anywhere in your lineup, do a good job, and that's Blake Coleman. This is someone who on the 2018 and 2019 Devils, absolutely dead teams, played 20 minutes a night on the first line and gave them 20 goals. This is someone we've seen on the Lightning play an integral part in one of the best playoff third lines of the last 15 years. This is someone who, since signing in Calgary, has played 19, 20 minutes per game on the left, on the right, with good players, with middling players, and been consistently a 15 to 20 goal guy. I think Blake Coleman, the value also, you get 2 playoff runs out of him because he's under contract this year and next year at only $4.9 million for the rest of this year and next year. You can get the Flames to retain some of that and get a premium player at $2.45 million, and you can play him anywhere in your lineup and feel good about it, and not in like a Barclay Gaudreau, Jimmy Vesey kind of way where he's just going to play defense and forecheck. He's a genuine complementary piece where if you put him on your second line opposite a star, he's going to do the dirty work and going into the corners and winning loose pucks. He is a really effective cycle player. 2 years ago when the Flames had the really weird year where they played really well, the underlying numbers were great, but they just didn't score enough. Him, Mangiapane, and Mikael Backlund had some of the best underlying numbers in the entire league because they would grind teams into a pulp. They would have offensive zone possession 55, 60% of the game and wear you down. And we have seen the value of these types of guys. Blake Coleman was a trade deadline addition for those Tampa Bay Lightning in 2019, 2020, and did an incredible job. And that's one of the real luxuries. If you have a good enough team that Blake Coleman's on your third line, you have a really good team. But if you're Colorado, if you're Minnesota, hell, if you're an average team, if you're just trying to push, I really like him for the Oilers. I don't think the Oilers are going to get a trade done with the Flames in conference stuff, in division stuff, in province stuff is a challenge. But this is the type of player I would love the Oilers to go after. Rather than Boone Jenner, rather than that type of gritty intangibles, go get a practical contributing player who still got upside and has a track record of playing with high-end guys and producing good counting stats. I think this is a really good player. You get 2 cracks at the playoffs with him, and you get the Flames to retain some of that salary. You can make another move on top of this to go with that.
Blake Coleman is, to me, what I like to call a jack-of-all-trades player. You can play him in virtually any situation, top line, second line, third line. Hell, Nick, if your team is deep enough, you can even play him on your fourth line, which, that would just be crazy, but still, I kind of think of like Tommy Novak in like that same sort of vein. Like that's how I describe him with Pittsburgh. Jack of all trades player, can play him up and down your lineup, can play him on the power play him at center. Oh, at least for Tommy Novak, you can play him at center or play him at wing. But, for Blake Coleman, again, you can literally play him. It's more the same up and down your lineup, play him on the power play. He'll give you some big time goals. I think playoff contenders will be all over him at the deadline.
I like him for the Stars too. I like him for Washington, who, if you're Washington and you don't feel like you can go into the Panarin deep end, go get Blake Coleman. He won't cost you a ton.
They got to do something. I think that makes a lot of sense because the status quo for Washington right now is simply not good enough. I know injuries have been a really big factor for that team this year, but they are still playing really bad. Like I was watching part of that Vancouver game last night. They looked out to lunch. It looks like they're out of answers. I think it's time for the GM to kind of do something there. If it's not Panarin, I think Coleman would make a lot of sense there. Someone that you can plug and play in your middle 6 to top 9, can give them another goal scoring option, especially when PLD comes back for this team. That's going to be huge for them, Nick. But yeah, that's a good option.
These are the types of guys you want to make moves for. You can play them anywhere. They're not going to be out of their depth anywhere. And most importantly, they don't cost a lot. Some of the options we've discussed today, Robert Thomas, Panarin, that's a lot of money, even if it's just even if you're getting the team to retain salary in the case of Panarin. The most the Rangers are getting that down to is like $5.6 million, which for some of these teams, that's just too cost prohibitive. They can't make that math work for the rest of the year. And then you have the added burden of need to negotiate an extension with Panarin to really get him to agree to come to your team. So with all of that said, I hope we've given you a little bit of flavor of the developing trade market. We will see you guys next week. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Check out the Everydayer Club. The link is down in the show notes to join. Get access to ad-free episodes of Locked On NHL on your preferred platform and access to the Locked On Everydayer Discord server. If this is your first listen, we encourage you go check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Listen to the recap of how the Capitals lost to the Canucks. If you are watching over on YouTube, we send you to the first ever national Locked On 24/7 YouTube channel. Hunter and I will see you guys next week.